Hello, welcome to the August 23rd, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through, and then we'll go ahead and begin shortly. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is... Hang on, I have it going on. Okay, so my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm based in the United States, and I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see. How the Club Cubase live stream works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you include which version of Cubase that you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which operating system and which version of Cubase. So if it's version 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, that information will be helpful. We'll try to get through all the questions chronologically asked. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, what you could do, if we could try to refrain from asking the same question multiple times, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the entire process. So, but if you don't see, I will do my best throughout the live stream to actually make sure that we get through all the questions in order asked. We should have several hours after the end of the live stream all of the questions and all the topics covered in the live stream actually indexed with timestamps so that you could find a particular topic and navigate directly to that particular section. So you could look for that several hours after the live stream. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in other live streams, I think we're past 19,000 questions. We're going to be zeroing in on 20,000 questions and topics covered in the live streams coming up soon. But you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm, he's not on the live stream today. He's going to his girlfriend's gig. So you could go there and just search for topics that have been covered in the live streams. We want to give also special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K, who serve as moderators. Excuse me. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better community. So we want to give special thanks to them. And also, we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for all his work in keeping up with the Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource for the Steinberg community. So special thanks twice to Jazz Dude. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I think we had a question that was mailed in. Let me see if it's on one of my... Okay, so I think it was a question about how to do a screen recording and have the audio from Cubase. So, you know, a program to do that, like for a lot of tutorials that I utilize, I do ScreenFlow on Mac OS, but you could use OBS is a free resource if you wanted to do your own recordings. You could use it. I use it for the broadcast for these live streams, but you could also use it for creating tutorials, and you could do different sample routing to get the audio out from the source for the particular live stream. So check out OBS, and that's a open source. So it's a free application. It's incredibly powerful. All right, so another question. How do you render a MIDI track in place to turn it into a waveform? So there's a couple different ways. The quickest and probably easiest way to do this is if we wanted to just select, I could select the event here, go to my edit menu, and let's go to render in place. Excuse me, there's a little tick in my throat. All right, and we'll have different settings here. So if I had multiple events, I could have those rendered as individual events. I could have it dry. I could have it with channel settings, complete signal path, or complete signal path plus master effects. So we could have different routing. So if I wanted to have the event selected, I could just choose to render, and then that would automatically take that MIDI event, and I have it chosen to just mute the particular channel right there, and then that would mute the MIDI. If we have the track selected versus the event, we could also just go to render in place, and we'll go to our render settings. And here we could just remove the source track. So I could just say render, and that will turn it into audio just like that. And we could replace the event. So you get some additional settings with the render in place when we have the track selected versus the events. But just do that, and you could include, you could have it dry. You could include the insert, send, inserts, channel strip, and EQ, or the sends or master effects. So that's probably the fastest way. See, Jazz Dude's also mentioning you could take any of it and drag it into a sampler track if you wanted to. It doesn't necessarily put it into the same place, but that will render it as an audio file. Okay. Okay, so we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, and we have Jazz Dude who's checking in from Germany. All right, and we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, and we have Detlef from Dusseldorf, and Uno Memento from Finland, John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Michael Pierce from London, or outside London. He'll be dropping in and out. We have Toyo checking in from Serbia. He's a proud Nuendo user. Congratulations. All right. And we have Benny checking in from Sweden. All right. And we have Matt Elston checking in from London. Giuseppe Vicari from Italy, looks like. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Maybe not a relevant question here, but where can I find icons for my new Stream Deck that fit Cubase 12? So as far as I know, there isn't like just a set of graphic icons. I know people will go through and do a screen capture and take all of the particular icons. There's a number of icons available for typical rewind, fast forward, like transport, and some other functions like loop for cycle and undo. On my Stream Deck, I tended to, when I did my setup, I did it all with text because a lot of times people could get confused with icons. So on my Stream Deck, I just kind of chose to do text based for kind of all of the functions. I found that worked really well. But some people would do just a screen capture of the program and take a little bit of, and just edit out a particular Cubase function for that. And I think that there is a company that's selling kind of a Stream Deck profile for Cubase. So you could check to see what they've created as well. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is setting up for recording tomorrow at the moment. We hope your session goes well. All right, so we have Soren checking in from Sweden, from Västerås. I'm sure I said that wrong. All right, we see Nick on the live stream. We have Denny Tom 83 checking in from India. All right, so we see from Tapio just says, guess you just downloaded all of the sounds and instruments from the download manager and later found out that they are not included with the Cubase Pro 12 license. Yeah, so there's a lot of people do that. You know, when you go to the Steinberg download manager, so let's say I'll just open this up just so you know. Bear with me just a second. So, you know, if you start with putting your download access code here, you could just say, okay, I want to go to my product downloads, and you'll see it just listed there. So, and then, but whatever license you have, if you just select your Cubase Pro 12 here, this would show you all of the content that's available for your particular license. So for every product that you have, just click here and you could see all the licenses. But if you had entered in the download access code here, you'll see you'll see under my products, and then you just select my product, and every product that you have, you'll see what's available within your license to download. So sorry, you probably spent a lot of time downloading lots of content that you don't have licenses for. So right, that's frustrating. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I got a question. So here's our question. I have a MIDI track in my timeline with C1, C2, C3. Is there a function like pitch visibility on off, but for the timeline? Okay, so let's say if we're in, let me just switch my preference here real quick. It's from Friday's live stream. Sorry, I'll just change this one more time. So let's say if we're here, you know, we could see the, you know, just this to indicate which octave that we are in here. So if it's this indication here, we would see that indicated. If it's for these, you know, where we see the notes indicated here, we see the pitch indicated on the note. If we just zoom the size at a certain point, it's too small to really be legible. So if you just change kind of the vertical height of the MIDI tracks, you can see that the note names will appear there. So these will always be visible just to indicate what pitch, what octave you're looking at, because you may not be looking at all of the octaves, so that you could see the pitch regardless, or have a reference for the octave regardless of your vertical height of the MIDI notes in the key editor. Okay, so we have a question. Could you show the best way to determine the BPM of a song and setting marker points to tweak the groove of, let's say, an acapella? Hope I was clear. So sometimes acapellas aren't the best thing to determine like what the beat of a song is, but I'll go ahead and we'll just take something with just a vocal performance here. Okay, so I'm just going to take my lead vocal here. And then we'll just, let's say we have just an acapella.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
So what I would do, so a lot of times if you have something like, guitar, it could be a little easier to work with. But all we have to do is, as we come directly here, we could go to our warp tool and we could choose our warp grid. And what this will allow us to do is, let's say, as we're listening, so say, okay, maybe we want this to be our downbeat.
Do you recall the day?
So let's say at this point, I could say, I want this to be beat 1.
Day we first met. That was a long.
And as we do this, what we could do is we can move the measures directly here to match up with the particular acapella vocal track. So if you just do that and basically just move the bars here with the warp tool. So put it into warp grid and then you could move, and that will change the tempo to automatically kind of map with the existing audio. So check out the warp grid tool. Okay. All right. So, okay. So we have a question. Could you explain the use cases for the ASIO latency compensation button tracks? When would you want to turn it off and on? Okay. So let's say in this project, if we had some plugins that were causing a bit of latency. So let's say on our output bus here, if we put on a plugin, like let's say we have a razor, we have so I'm going to come over here. Let's say if I put a multi-band compressor. Now, when we go to actually look in our mix console, sorry, adjust my keyboard. And we look at our latency. So we see our channel latency here. So we can see that the plugins inserted on this track are causing 116 milliseconds of latency. So just having those plugins on while we record is causing 116 milliseconds of latency in addition to the buffer. So if we wanted to record without those plugins turned on, what we could do is click on the constrained delay compensation button, and that would bypass plugins that have high latency, so that as we record, the plugins that are causing a lot of latency could easily be bypassed, and that we could just now have all of the plugins active. So while tracking, if you have a lot of plugins, let's say you have a full mix and maybe you're doing an overdub on a vocal or some punch-ins, and the latency of the entire signal path in the project is high because of different plugins, instead of having to go through and manually turn off or bypass those particular plugins, you could hit the constrained delay compensation, and that would bypass the particular plugins that have a lot of latency, so that you could just simply turn it on and turn it off just with one mouse click. All right, so we have Kerwin Young checking in from Atlanta. So thanks for being a part of the live stream today. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, what would be if there are benefits to monitoring through a DAC during tracking, editing, mixing? The only potential benefit of monitoring through a DAC could be on a tracking side that kind of comes to mind, is that you could minimize the latency. But if you're minimizing through a DAC, you may not be hearing backing tracks. So if you are recording on top of other tracks, then you monitoring through a DAC, if you're not hearing the monitor tracks going through the digital to analog conversion, you probably wouldn't hear the backing tracks. So if you're just recording directly like everyone live and you wanted to monitor without any latency of the particular plugins or the audio interface, you could monitor off the DAC. And for editing, mixing, I don't really see any real benefits to doing that because you're probably going to be editing existing information and mixing existing information. So the only real benefit would be if there's no audio information and maybe you're recording a band and you wanted to monitor off of the DAC during tracking. So that's what I'm thinking. Okay, so we see just comment. Well, there is some interesting stuff. Maybe I'll buy some of it later, but that download list should list only things I already have to access. So once you're in, I'll just go back. Once you're in the download assistant, just click on My Products, and then My Products is what is available for you to download. So, it's kind of like walking into a store. You don't necessarily, because you bought one thing at a store, doesn't give you access to take everything that's in the particular store. So once you're here and you enter your download access code, just go to your My Products, and that's everything that's going to be showing up in your My Products. All right, so we have a question from Ed Rugman. Says, hi from Lancashire, UK. Could you explain the select track takes with same ID on takes lanes for comping a multi-mic and multi-take project, for example, drums? How does the ID get determined? Okay, so I'm going to come here. Let's do a new project. Okay, so I'm going to do just quick drum recording. Let's say we're multi-track recording. All right, and I'm just going to put these all into a folder track. Okay, so now if I record directly in, so we'll see our recording. Okay, now how we assign IDs is when we utilize track versions. So if I have all these selected and we say new version, at this point we can have different audio recordings on the same tracks, but different versions. Okay, so let's say we do another new version recording. So this is version 3, so we see kind of the brackets V3. All right, so now if I wanted to just say, okay, I wanted all of these to change to version 1, take 2, take 3. And let's say at this point I switch this one to take 2 and this one to take 3 or take 1. All right, so we have take 1, take 2, everything else take 3. Say version 3, and now at this point we can say select tracks with the same version ID. So that's kind of how we could just simply go over there. So how to set that is just setting up a new track version. And that's where you would get the ID set, and you could manually set the ID if you needed to. All right, so we see Rich Schweitzer. This is Cubase in West Palm Beach. I got to go down there and be on a radio show a number of years ago, about 20 years ago. It was kind of fun. The Computer America show or something with Craig Crosswaite. All right, and let's see. We have a boy called Hedge checking in from Cologne, Germany. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to hide VST2 from the plugin list? I use only VST3 or just one way to create my own plugin list without VST2. So really all you have to do is come to the studio menu and let's go to the VST plugin manager. You'll have, if we click on the settings icon here, you can see VST2 plugin paths. So if you don't want any VST2 plugins, you could just delete these particular plugin paths, and then Cubase won't look for VST2 plugins in those particular paths. We could indicate, you could see right here, which, when we select a plugin, if it's VST3, VST2. So we could see that. And if we click in the upper right-hand corner, we could go to click on the plus sign and we could do a new collection. So we'll click on empty. And then we could just, create a new plugin collection and only put plugins in. But, the easiest way, if you don't want VST2 plugins at all, is just to come right over here, select the path so that it's not looking in any paths for VST2 plugins. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have Avery checking in from Tel Aviv. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the live stream today. All right, and we have Filter Freak on. Thanks for being on the live stream. And Kafaroon Creative checking in from Indonesia. Okay, so we see a question. Here I have a plugin with some automation, auto-tune. How can I move the plugin to a new channel and keep the automation? Okay, so the automation is not necessarily tied to the plugin, but is going to be at the track level. So what you could do is copy the automation. So let's say, okay, we have this particular, let's say I want to come, let's say, okay, I want to come to my pitch correct plugin. And let's say I will automate some parameters here of the pitch correct plugin on this particular channel. Okay, so now, I have it set up in my particular preferences here, where as we go to write automation, that in settings, that it will reveal the parameter on write. So if I move, because this automation is on this particular track, so we're going to say, okay, when we look at this, it's going to be our pitch correct transpose function. All right, so if I copy this particular plugin to a different track, so let's say we have this plugin here, I'll just copy it over. So I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and drag that over. So at this point, if I wanted this particular automation, I could select all the automation on the tracks. I think even if we come over here, we can say select. I have that automation lane open. Select all unselected tracks. We will now come over here and copy. And we could just find the same parameter here. So we'll say transpose, set that up. And at this point, we will just paste. And I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus a V, and this will do a paste at origin. And then make sure that this is set to right. But again, that automation is going to be on the track and not associated with the plugin. So when you move the plugin, you have to copy the automation over. And you could do different macros in project logical editors to copy automation as well. So, and it's one thing I was trying to show last week, and if you wanted to set up a project logical editor to copy automation, and I couldn't get it working last week, and I kind of figured out what it was. So let's say if we have automation on this particular track, say multiple states of automation, and we wanted to copy all of the automation from our source track to our destination track, we could go into our project logical editor. So what I did is I made two different presets. So it's kind of a two-stage process. So one is to copy. So to copy the automation on a selected track. So here on my functions, we chose select. And we can say media type is equal to automation. And this is in the project menu to the project logical editor. And property is set to parent object is selected. And then for the post process, we just chose to edit copy. So this will go through all of the automation on this track, copy it, select it, and copy it. And then what I want to do is to paste that automation at the origin on a different track. So we're going to choose select, automation, property set to parent object is selected, and we're going to do paste at origin. And paste at origin places it at the same exact time. So what I was running into last week when I was trying to show this and was having kind of a brain cramp was I had the range selection tool active. But if we have the object selection tool, I created a macro to now, I'll show the macro quickly, and it's basically just running these, and I called it copy and paste multi-automation. So it's just copying that project logical editor preset and then pasting it. So if I did everything right, I'm going to select this particular track, and let's see if I have better luck today than last Friday. So we're going to copy and paste the automation from the first track directly to the second track. So we can see that that just worked again. So again, if we set up our project logical editor, two different presets. So one is to basically copy the automation, and then we want to take that automation and paste it. Now, as we do this, we want to have the same automation lanes open and to have our tool currently set to the object selection tool. All right, so that's good. Move on. Thanks for all the great questions. We see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas is on the live stream. Thank you very much. I was thinking of you yesterday. I hope you did okay with all the massive rain that I saw going on in Dallas, Fort Worth area. All right. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay, so we have a question from Asher Albert. Hello, Greg. Is there a way to find the settings that we save in Cubase, for examples, EQ, reverb, etc.? Because when I installed Cubase 12, I lost all of my previously saved settings. So one of the things you can do if you have it in a previous version is go to your Edit menu and come over here to Profile Manager. So you could just... and then at this point, choose to export your profile, and then you could import it directly in. So if you're going in version 11, you could export your profile from version 11, and then import it into Cubase into version 12. And then all of your user settings for your plugins should automatically just show up like that. Okay, so we just see a question. How can I time stretch a whole song? Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just open up a quick project. So we could do this in real time. So as long as we, if we've recorded the audio into Cubase, Cubase will tempo stamp each of the audio files, and we could see this in the pool. So we could see that we'll see our tempo. So as I record a new audio file into Cubase here, I'll just add a quick audio track. And let's say I record. So we have audio 01. And now when I go to my pool window, we'll see that we'll have audio 01 indicated here, and we see the tempo stamp is 100 beats a minute. So what we could do now is in the pool, we could activate musical mode here, or we could select all of the files in our project and activate musical mode directly from our info line. Now, all I have to do is once all the files are in musical mode, as I play, I could just type in a new tempo and it will just follow. Let's say our tempo is set to 100 beats a minute, and I want it to be 88. I could just time stretch it in real time. So let's say back to 100. And if I wanted to now speed it up, so you could just have it time stretch it in real time and kind of dynamically change whatever tempo you want it to be. All right, so we have another question from Ed Rugman. If we have VST2 plugins in a current project and open that down the line in a few years' time when the VST3 is here, will automation data settings saved within a CPR open in the VST3? So sometimes it will. It depends if the plugin automatically migrates from seeing a VST2 to a VST3. If it's sometimes they change the name of the plugin. And then it won't correlate over, but a lot of plugins will automatically just kind of carry over directly to the VST3 version if the plugin developer has kept and maintained the same name between the plugins. All right, we see Michael Teams is okay with all the flooding in Dallas area. So he only got 2 inches in 14 hours. So that's good. I was thinking of you yesterday. So glad to hear you guys are safe and that your rain mostly got soaked in. All All right. So I see from my experience, and this kind of a further continuation, there doesn't seem to be a way to get VST to VST2 to VST3 settings to transfer well unless you automate every parameter. Now in VST2, would all the automation then work across VST3? So for the most part, if the plugin is, as mentioned before, kind of maintaining the same name and have the same parameters, and the order of the parameters is similar, but if there's, the VST3 version has 60 more parameters, and if they change the order of the parameters, that might get messed up. But I've done it a number of times with older plugins and migration. So I see Michael Teams has started his ice cream distribution. It's always so nice on hot summer days, even good in winter when it's cold out. All right, so we see Gerald Ely just popping in, say hi, and hit the like button. Yeah, so, and if you learn a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. That enables us to continue to do these live streams and offer this as a service to our users. All right, so we see from Diamond District Studios, just asking, could you run us through Logical Editor? I would like to cut down time on setup processes like routing and color coding, not necessarily templates. Okay, we'll show you a couple things. So let's say everything in, let's say we have a drum folder. So let's say I wanted to take everything that's in a drum folder and colorize it. Okay, so, and let me go ahead and I'm just going to add a bus as well. So I'm going to add a group channel. And we'll call this drum group. Okay, so let's see if we could do this in one fell swoop. So let's say I want to change the color of every track that's in the drum group and also assign it to the drum, or every track that's in the drum folder. I wanted to route it to the drum group and change it to a different color. So let's see if we can get that going without me messing it up. All right. So I'm going to choose transform. And we're going to say our media type, we'll say container type is equal to folder track. And then insert, then let's say name contains drum. Let's see if we have to get a property. All right, so say I have that selected. All right, so I want to set color to a fixed value, let's say yellowish. And let's see if we go to track operation, connect output, say to our drum group. All right, so there we did it to new color, and let's see if, and they're all now just set to our drum group. So I just said transform. You want to take folder tracks, and that the folder contains drum, and the parent object is selected. Let's say this, and I wanted to set it to fixed value, and then route it to our drum group. So we could just set that up like that. So that's some ways, but let me know if that's helpful. And if you need more examples, I mean, we could spend days working on Project Logical Editor and Logical Editor presets. But if you have like a particular scenario, then we could be happy to show you that. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream as well. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we see Jay Yarborough Music checking in from Florida. All right, we see Michael Teams going to have a session in Dallas later. Okay, so we see for Michael Teams, please explain the difference between group channels and VCA channels. Which should be used and for what circumstances? I'm confused on the issue. So if you want to take all of the sources and sum them together to put processing on it. So I want to take all of my background vocals and put a compressor on the background vocals as a collective entity. I would use the group. If I had a lot of kind of pre-existing automation in different tracks set up, going to effects, and I wanted to increase or decrease the level with a lot of automation, then I would use a VCA. The VCA doesn't sum the actual sound, but so I'll show you kind of an example of like when a VCA makes sense. All right, so let's say all right, so I go to my mix console here, and I can see that my drums all have kind of existing automation, and sometimes this automation so where my automation may be going up or down, when I adjust my VCA fader and automate the VCA, I can bring all my tracks down, but even if they had automation that was going in contrary motion, it would still be just kind of decreased. So now if I bring a VCA up, all the tracks can add more volume, but actually just simply even go against contrary motion of what my VCA is. I could bring all my tracks down, and the automation being written is just kind of minimized if I lower the VCA, or I could expand it by raising the VCA. But the really important thing is if I have my effect send and I have my VCA, let's say on my snare, and I bring my snare volume down, we notice that the effect send doesn't get the relationship between the track feeding the effect send is not altered. So if I have like painstakingly set up my levels going to my auxiliary sends, my effect sends, I could decrease the volume without that gain structure between the channel and the effect send being altered. So if you want to sum the channels and process it as a collective entity, groups. If you have a lot of automation that's going in contrary motion and you have a lot of effect sends set up and you want to maintain that, then use a VCA. And you could have a group and a VCA going simultaneously to kind of do both if needed. All right. All right, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, a great example on the tempo for acapella. Even my brain absorbed it. So question, how might we normalize set consistent tempo after setting up-down warp markers to add other instruments? So once we have kind of the warp markers engaged, so let's say if I come here, so let's say I have, let's say a number of different tracks, and I have, and I've set up the warp. So let's just say when I come here, so let's say we've warped to grid. As soon as I, have the warp markers, this will define like where the downbeat is, and this is defining like the tempo changes like we see here. So once we've set up kind of the warp markers, then if other tracks are in musical mode, they will follow the tempo warp markers. So as long as you know what kind of the original tempo is, then once it's placed into musical mode, it'll almost be like a musical parasite, if you will. It'll just kind of follow the tempo. So as you make the warp markers, as you do the warp grid markers, then everything that's in musical mode and your MIDI by default will all follow those particular timing, those tempos. So we see from John West, hi there, with new MIDI remote scripting, will there be any workshops or videos on how to use it? So I think that there may be some videos on it, but I could put on my list to do a video on using the scripting functions. It's pretty easy to set up, but I haven't delved so much into the scripting capabilities, but I can, and we'll see if I get a tutorial video created for that. All right, so we see a question. This is passed me by. Do I need a dongle anymore when I have Cubase 12? So everything that comes with Cubase 12, you do not need a dongle for, or USB-E licenser. If you have some programs that, not all Steinberg programs have migrated over. So like currently Halion, if you have Halion standalone or Halion Sonic standalone, those will still require the USB-E licenser. Some content, some of the instrument sound sets will also utilize that. So, but if you just have Cubase, then your Cubase and all the instruments that come with it will function without having the USB-E licenser connected. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button so I can be kept gainfully employed. So that's always good. I'll concur with that. Thank you, Michael. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just find. All right, so we see, hi Greg, question. Can I copy Flex Phaser from one preset to another in Halion? So let's go ahead and just open up. Let's do new project here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let's say I'll just load up quick. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll just open up a flex phraser here. Okay, so let's say I'll set this to all right, so we have, let's say just I'm just going to hold down a chord here. Find something a little more interesting. Okay. Okay, so can I copy flex phraser from one preset to another in Hallion? So I think really, as soon as we come over and just save the preset. So let's say if I just change this. All right, and so that once we click here, okay, so let's say I come over here to my user. Let's see if I could save. Okay, so then all you have to do is just click here and you could save the phrase. All right, so I'm going to So let's load up a different instrument into Hallian. So have all right, so let's say now I want this to go to get a different brass patch there. All right, so now I'm just holding a chord. We'll come over to edit, and we'll go to our flex phraser here. And now, so that's how you could save them as presets. So if you just click on user and then come right over here, you could then add your own presets. So let me know if that works for your workflow. Okay, John Koskins is saying we sincerely like likes. All right. All right. So we have a question. Any idea why my musical mode is not always working properly? What I mean is that sometimes audio is not following my changed tempo. This is happening for a full song as well, for remix purposes, let's say. So one is to make sure that when you're putting it into musical mode, it's going to actually need a tempo reference point. So when I'm here, we can make sure that as we're working with your particular files, so make sure that you have an actual tempo reference. So when you go to the pool window, make sure that you see a tempo here. Sometimes people don't record to a particular click track, and they may just have the tempo set at 120 beats a minute, and they're just instead of having the main timeline in bars and beats, they may have it set to seconds because it's a live band playing and it's not sequenced and programmed. So if you go into your pool window and notice that it's maybe 120 beats a minute, if you don't actually go through if you see the pool window again and you notice that everything's at 120 beats a minute, this could be the wrong tempo value. So it needs to have kind of an origin tempo value with it. So if we select and so let's say you don't know what the tempo was of the recorded file originally. And sometimes, I've seen clever engineers who don't want projects to leave their studio, change the tempo to a known value that's off so that if they go to a different studio, none of the tracks line up. It's kind of a good studio trick. But if you go to like tempo detection, I'll just take this out of musical mode. So let's say as we would come over to, so if that's the case, you don't know what the tempo is, just come over here and do a tempo detection of the audio. And then at that point, what you could do is for all of the files, go to your audio and go to advanced. And then you can choose set definition from tempo. And that will embed the various tempo values, the varying tempo values into the audio files, and then once you place it into musical mode. So there's a good chance that the tempo isn't set correctly. And if that's the case, and you don't know what the tempo is, do a tempo detection and go to audio to advanced to set definition from tempo, and then that will embed all the metadata into the files, even if there's multiple tempos used in the project. All right, so we have Stephen Rooney checking in from Ireland. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Michael Jensen moving my Cubase from Mac Mini to new Mac Studio. Is there any easy way to save and move all of my settings? Thanks from Denmark. So come over again to your edit menu, go to your profile manager, export your profile from your Mac Mini, and then import it into your Mac Studio. Then restart the program and everything should be carried over. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on the live stream from Montana. There we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Good to see you on as well. So we see question, would you share your thoughts on native Mac M1 plugin compatibility? It's one of the only things holding me back from getting a Mac Studio. So, it really, I think like, the one that's kind of like holding me back from running kind of full native mode is Halion. I'm sure it's being worked on. But, it is a pretty significant architecture that's going on underneath the hood that a lot of developers have to kind of redesign. So, but, other than that, most of the plugins that I'm using, I could do fully on M1 Mac, but, just really check your projects and see which plugins you tend to use. You still will get great performance on running Rosetta. So if it runs in Rosetta or runs on M1, if you run all the tracks you want and it's a performance increase, it's still a performance increase. But like a lot of things that happen on Mac OS, there's a transition period. And, when they went to OS X, it wasn't until 10.2, the second major version. So the third version, the second revision, where they even had audio and people were running 2 operating systems at the time. It's not as bad as that. But, figure out what plugins that you're using and see if they're running as M1 native. So, but all the plugins that come with Cubase are, so. All right, so we have a question from Thomas Sheppers. Hi, Greg. Thomas from Germany. Could you please explain how to cut and move a whole song part? Okay, so an easy way is to use the range tool. So if you're using kind of like, the combined tools, you could select from the top. And I think it's just if you hold down Control plus Shift while you're in the range tool, you could just kind of cut a whole section just like that. Or if you wanted to move a whole section, so I'll just say Control Shift. Let me just, so while my range tool is selected, and then I'm going to hold down the Alt, operator error. So Control or Command plus Shift. So I have all of those parts. And then if I hold down my Alt or Option key, I could just move a whole section of a song. So again, try not to let it switch tools on me. So Control, Shift, and then you could just move just like that with the range tool. So let me know if that works for you, Thomas. All right, we see Lanewood Studios has Cherry Jubilee ice cream as a gift from Michael Teams. That's very generous. Okay, so we see SL beginner, please share me Hydra 3 VST guitar. So I'm not sure if that's directed to me, but I'm not sure if it's a Steinberg product. All right, so we see Bob S. just says, hi, Greg, previously watched you directly on Roku, YouTube, so could not message. This is from Bob S. So thanks for being on the live stream. We're glad that you could message us. Yeah, we have lots of people to watch it on Roku and Amazon Fire Sticks, interestingly enough. So, all right, so we see Michael Teams just says, thanks for the explanation on VCA versus group. Understand it now. Revelation of the day already. So that's good. Okay, so we see Jay from Connecticut just says, I tried MIDI drums to Warped in musical, but it sounded off. I'm actually wondering how to lock a set tempo after warping for consistency. All right, so let's go ahead and all right, so let's say I'll just drop this. All right, so let's say I want to just come here to the tempo. All right, so now we'll see if we should hear our MIDI drums here speed up, slow down. Here, let me just make it. So now we'll have it start to speed up. Okay, so let's say this is all right, so I tried MIDI drums to Warped in musical mode, but it sounded off. I'm actually wondering how to lock it to a set tempo after warping for consistency. So if we have our MIDI drums here and whatever, so I'll just export these as a MIDI file here. All right, so I'll do okay, so let's say now we listen to, I have no tempo information. All right, so let's say we have our MIDI that's going to be kind of speeding up, falling down here. All right, so we have no tempo data. So as we're here, so we're playing back just kind of straight tempo. All right, so let's say if I want to, we'll go into, let's say, our drum editor. All right, so let's say we'll switch here to my warp tool. Let me just have it follow. Sorry about that. So say, okay, measure 4. We want to just switch to our warp tool. So as we would do kind of our warping here, so we just kind of warp to the particular event. So now that we've done that, and let's say I want it all to be 144. So as I slow down the tempo here, you notice that it will just kind of automatically follow the tempo. So let me know if that's helpful, Jay. All right. Just reading through comments. All right, we see Peter from Montreal on. All right, wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Nashville at Big Tent. Hope you both are doing well. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, I need some help configuring my control room as I always use directly the stereo out. Now I have lost or don't know how to configure, for instance, a click metronome. Thanks a lot. Okay, so let's say we have our control room. Let's jump back over to this project. So what I have set up in my studio connections is I'll just come over here to my audio connections. I'll have like a main stereo output, but I'll choose not connected. So we'll have that set to not connected. And in my audio connections, I will come over to the control room. I'm going to right click to add a monitor. And then this is where I define where the output is going from my audio interface. So now as I play back, we can see.
The day we first met, that was a long, long time.
So now I can control the monitoring volume without affecting the gain structure here. And if I wanted to have my click track, I would just, there's a separate click track. So if you hit C to activate the click track in the project, just click right here. And you could just have the click track, and you could have a separate click track volume. So as you come right over here, you can see your click track. So the click track, you could have the click track turned on in the project window. Rather here. So let's say, so we got the click track turned on here, but if it's not turned on in the control room, you may not hear it. So these two can be different. So you could, have the click track on here. But if you're using the control room and you don't hear the click track and you're like, it's on, I can't hear it, it's driving me crazy, just click on the click track in the control room. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, and Guido just asked a question, is just saying hello from Argentina. Thanks for joining us all the way from Argentina. All right, so we have a question. I have one bad ear that I do not hear well out of. Is there a way to split the left-right channel on the master other than pan? I was looking for a way to turn up the volume for my bad ear. So I think it's going to be, just going to be routed to... all right, let's see if I have a project, and let me route it all to 2 different groups. Maybe we could do something like that. Okay, so let's say I want to take all of my tracks here. And I'm going to add, first I'm going to, let me just add 2 group channels. Okay, so we'll try 2 mono group channels. Haven't ever tried this. All right, so I'll call this group left and right. Okay, so I want to come over here to sends. And I'm going to activate Q-Link. I'm going to select all my channels in the project. I'm going to send them all to the left. We can set it all to same value, and let's send them all to the right. Okay, so now let's say we're playing back our project here. Okay, so let's say I'm going to come over. Let's say if we had to make it. Okay, so we could pan this mono group. All right, so let me send all of these to my stereo out. Let's check my send routing again. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick link again here for all, let's say all my drum tracks. Okay, so we're going to turn these all on. Turn these all on, send them to, let's say, roughly the same levels. All right, so now so I have my left and right. So if I wanted my right to be louder, so I think we could route them to two mono groups and be able to, seems like this. All right, let me just take. I'm set to the wrong destination. All right, so now if I wanted to take, all right, so let me set the routing for all the tracks up again. Sorry about that. So I'm going to take all my drum tracks and we'll go to our sends, and I want to send this to left and to right. So now all of our drums are going into our two groups. So if I wanted the right to be louder, but that could obviously affect your mix. So this way we could say, You could adjust like one of them louder, but you may also, let's say if we're doing this in the control room is probably a better spot because you don't want your mix necessarily to be unbalanced when you export, but maybe what you're monitoring. So you could send it to 2 mono groups, and those mono groups could be sent out if you wanted to, but if you didn't want to worry about setting the levels the same way, I would probably do it via a control room insert. So see if there's probably a panner. So, you know, once we have, so say as we're playing back our project here, if we wanted to have it more on the left or more on the right, we could adjust it in the control room to pan it that way. So, you know, that's another way of doing it. And that way, when you export the mix, it doesn't necessarily, you know, it's not exported because that's just kind of the monitoring path with that. So maybe using the panner, but if that didn't work for you, if you didn't want to use a panner, send it to 2 mono groups, and then you could adjust so that it's evened out in your hearing. So. All right, so we see Lanewood Studios has to go. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so to see kind of maybe the start of a question. Let me see if it's continued down later. All right, so it says, I'm having trouble setting up my drum tracks, grouping, colorizing tracks with a folder in the Logical. So we did that just a couple of minutes ago. So, but we'll do it again. So let's say in the Logical editor. So, you know, if I wanted to take a number of tracks and change the colors, you know, without using a Logical editor, I could select all my tracks, go to the color tool and just colorize just like that. And if I wanted to hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, we could also just come right there, and now all the selected tracks are now being routed to a particular output. So, but if you want me to do it in the Logical editor again, so Alt or Option plus Shift to change the routing, and then select all of the tracks with no events selected, but all the tracks, and hit the color tool, and then you could just pick a color accordingly like that. So, but let me know if I missed maybe the second half of your question. Maybe I'll come up to it a little bit later. All right, we see Michael Pierce is all done for his setup. And he's going to go home and log back in. All right. All right. So we have a question. Looks like from Balsa. Hi, Greg. Thanks for all the wonderful guidance. How can to clips in each of their tracks switch places, one replacing the other? All right. Let me jump back to a different project. All right, so let's say I have this project here. So let's say if I want to so let's say if I have an audio file like from the pool window, so I'm not sure if it's, I want to replace it. So if I wanted to, let's say I had the same audio file used multiple times in a project and I wanted to replace it with another, if we drag it over from the pool window, we could just come directly here, hold down the shift key. It'll ask, do you want to replace all the events in a particular every time that one audio file is used? So we could replace our sounds like that. So again, just shift key and drag over top. And we'll say all, and then all of the files will be replaced. Sometimes I also get this question where we have maybe two files that are on top or next to each other. So let's say something like this, and I'll just colorize this one differently for demonstration purposes. We could put our grid into shuffle mode. So now as soon as I move this one to the front, they'll kind of swap spaces. I move that one to the back. So let me know if either of those, I'm going to just reread it one more time. So if you wanted to switch places, you do that. So let me know if that's what it is. So, and that is just go to grid and change that to shuffle. Otherwise, you could drag it over top. But once it's set to shuffle, at this point, I could just move this to the beginning and then they'll just kind of switch places. So let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we see Madge Deepers joining from the UK. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. And we see Michael Teams is already granted 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream. So, all right, we have Jeff Zabelski checking in from Chico, California. Glad to see you again. We missed you while you were out for a while. Okay, we have Daniel checking in from Munich. Welcome to the live stream. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, we see from Cubase X says, hi, Greg, great hangout as usual. Just keep learning. Thank you. I usually try to learn new things. I usually learn some new things in every live stream as well. All right, so we see a question from Madge Deepers. Does anyone use Dorco? How does it compare to Notion? So I think Dorco, I don't know Notion very well, but I think Dorco has a lot of momentum with all the development and just workflow and solving problems that people run into for years and years and sometimes decades with other programs. And it's just kind of a smarter toolbox. Plus, it's from Steinberg, and it's made by a company that's really into music and owned by a music company. So there's a lot of great momentum with Dorco. All right, so we see a question. I associated .back files with Cubase 12. Now in my hub, I'm getting back files under recent. This is for obvious reasons, not what I want. How can I stop .back files from showing up in the hub recent? Thanks. So I think if it's, I would just probably make the association, not not to that, because anytime it's going to save a backup, it's going to be a recent project if that's what is saved. So maybe go into your operating system if you right click and know that the .bak files, which are in the same location as your project files, that at that point exactly where the files are, that maybe they don't have to be associated with Cubase. All right, so we have all right, so we see hi Greg, so a question, Christoph from Hamburg, Germany here. Could you please show us how to transfer all settings from a previous version to a new Cubase 12 installation? So the vast majority can come directly, go to the edit menu, to the profile manager, and export from Cubase 11 and import into Cubase 12. There may be a few smattering of different things that aren't. And depending on your operating system, if we go to on the Windows platform, if you go to your start menu, go to all programs, you'll see Steinberg Cubase. You'll see an application data folder or user settings data folder. That folder you could copy from 11 into 12 on the Mac OS. So I can't really show it on. But if we go to your Finder and hold down the Alt Option key, you'll see the library. And then we could go to Preferences. You'll see a Preferences folder. And then if you keep scrolling down, you see Cubase 12, or you'll see your Cubase 11 preferences, and then you could copy them into your Cubase 12 preferences. Most of the time, it's going to automatically be carried over, but if not, you can manually do that or just use the profile manager. And I miss going to Hamburg. Hopefully, we'll be able to travel again, but I haven't been there in like 3 or 4 years. Missing all my colleagues in Hamburg. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer, who made it from Beulahville, North Carolina. Glad you could be a part of the stream today. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. Is there a way to assign a button to open the lower zone mixer, sampler, chord pads? I want to assign a button to each. Okay, so I think so. So let's come over here. So here you can see open audio part editor in lower zone, open drum editor in lower zone, open key editor in lower zone, sample editor in lower zone, score editor. Then you could show hide the lower zone. Then I think that there might be a mixer lower zone as well. So look under editors. And let's just look for chord pads. Show hide chord pads. And then I think we'll see for mixer. It might be. But yeah, so take a look under the editors and in the chord pad section. And I think I'm pretty sure that there's a mix console to lower zone as well. So. All right, so seeing more discussion on the .bak file. So just so yeah, my backup files aren't showing up. So it's just .cpr files, as Jazz Dude is mentioning. As mentioned before, try just changing the file association. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions. Let me just go to some of our questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick, and that if you have learned something, make sure you hit the like button. All right. All right, so we had a question sent in: how to mute audio selected by the range tool. Okay, so when we come over here, we could just say, just drag a file in quickly. Okay, so let's say we have a particular area here, and I wanted, let's say I had a selection, I just wanted to mute that selection. So we could do this with a macro, and I think I've already created it, so I don't have to stumble through that. All right, so I just created that. So I'm going to undo that, and let's go ahead and take a look at the macro to do this. So to make a macro, we want to go to our key commands. and I just have this called mute selected range. So what I want to do, and what a macro is a series of edits. And let's say you had to find your particular, if you find that you're doing the same repetitive motions where it's like you have to do these 7 steps all the times, many times we could create a macro to actually go through those particular steps for us. So here what I've done is I want to switch. So we'll say I want to select the range. We're going to split the range. We're going to toggle a preference. And this is assuming that this preference, which by default is off, and it's going to be when we go to so when we come over here to editing and this preference is off, is auto select events under cursor. And this is a preference that I just saw someone ask, what's the point of that preference? It's often if you have a control surface and you kind of hover over a particular event, it could select that event. So we're going to have that preference disabled, and we're actually going to turn it on and turn it off as part of the macro so that we know what kind of state it's in, and we're kind of back to where it's kind of a, like a known entity. So we'll say, and then at this point, so we're going to split the range. We're going to, at this point, and turn on that macro. We're going to switch to the range tool, and then we're going to choose edit select events under cursor, and then we're going to nudge +1 frame. So we're going to move the playhead position over 1 frame, then so that selects the frame as soon as it's moved over. Then we're going to mute the selected event and then change that preference back to where it was. So to do this so instead of having to do those steps constantly, what we could do now is come right over here, run the macro. So we'll say mute selected range, and that will just do it. And if I wanted to mute a different selected range, I could come again, just come directly to the macros, and then that selected range can be muted just that easily. And to assign a keyboard shortcut, if you find that you'll be doing this a lot, we could go to the key commands, and then you'll see under macros that we could now assign a key command to actually trigger that particular macro. Or if you wanted to trigger that from a MIDI remote control, you could do that as well. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. I have asked you this in live streams, but whatever I do, nothing seems to solve this. I installed Cubase Pro 11 on a new PC, and on that PC, I've attached my older USB drive with tons of WAV files, etc. Every time I start Cubase, I get this warning. When the media bay attempted to mount the volume database on drive E, duplicate entries were found. How should this be resolved? Don't mount volume database, delete local database entries, whatever option I try, I keep getting this over and over again. Any ideas? Never had this before. And then he had sent a picture, and as you can see, my media bay, nothing special. It all seems okay. Hope somebody can give me an answer on this. Okay, so often when you get this message, it could be, so it's when we go to the media bay. So let's say if I have like a hard drive here, and this is just like an external drive similar to what your scenario is, try right clicking on the drive and just try clicking on create volume database. The picture you sent is also indicates that it's red. So that means that maybe it's also searching. It's currently indexing all of the particular files that are in that particular drive. Now, sometimes that there's a preference so that as we start here, let's go to preferences to media bay. There is a preference that can scan folders only when media bay is active. So make sure that that is not checked, because if that's checked, it may only be doing the scanning through your external drive when media bay is open. And every time you start it, it starts again and it never finishes. So make sure that that is unchecked, but try just to, when you go to the media bay, make sure right click and that you can create the volume database on that particular drive as well. All right, so we had a question. As you may know, within the EU, we must save 15% of energy to heat homes this winter. I've studied whether Cubase can save energy, and there are great possibilities. It turned out that if I have two projects, a main and a tiny project, and a tiny project equals power drain project, are loaded, I can deactivate the main project when we take a coffee break. Unfortunately, the activate project icon disappears when only one project is loaded. Why is the icon not visible all the time, even when one project is loaded? You may ask, why is it better to use activate icon versus to quit the project? A, track overview are still left on the screen. B, avoid mistake to load a wrong version when restarting the project. So it's my workaround to power save has several advantages. The GPU processor is still active. Cubase memory allocation is returned to the operating system at power down. And 3, force to load a tiny project to get activate project icon to become available. So, if there is one, I commend you for the energy savings. That's a great thing for everyone to do and to think of in kind of our daily use. But when we have the activate project, and that becomes visible when there's two projects to kind of simply activate back and forth between. I'll mention it because obviously our developers are based in the EU as well. If there's a way, so the intention was to have multiple projects, as you see I do throughout the live streams, where we have multiple projects open, and I can just turn one on and off just like that. One other thing is just, it may not be as the biggest priority, because a lot of people, I think, would go to their operating system and just choose to sleep from the operating system. So if you're on Windows, you could just go to your power options and choose to sleep, or after 5 minutes of inactivity to put your computer to sleep, and that will also free up energy resources, I believe, as well. But I'll mention it to the developers. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to use the NanoPad 2 to assign key commands to its pads and to the XY panel? So yeah, you could definitely do that. So let me come over and we'll just show how to make a MIDI remote with anything that's kind of spitting out MIDI data. So I will come right over here. All right, so we're going to make a new MIDI remote device. And for this, I'll just choose like a Nectar P4. Okay, I'm the script creator. Okay, so now I want to just assign like MIDI notes on my controller to do different functions, and I'll just make them into buttons now. I'll just start again without making a mistake. All right, so we're going to say, okay, I want these to be buttons. And as I hit keys on my keyboard, they're just automatically populating. And now when we go to our mapping assistant, I could just say, okay, I want this to double click, and then we could just kind of zoom in and out or whatever function that you want. So let's say when I hit this button, I want it to play. So, we could also just select when we go into like the mapping assistant here. So as soon as I come over here, I could just say, okay, I could right click on the function and that will pick it up, and we could apply the mapping. So let's say the next button I want, so we select this button here. I want this to be play. So you could right click, apply the mapping, or go through. I want this button to trigger my macro that I created. So we'll see all of our key commands. We'll say macro, mute selection. And then we could just double click. So now if I wanted to mute just a selection of the audio, I could just select it here. And then we could just, run our different commands just accordingly, just like that. So yeah, you could take anything that transmits MIDI data and use that as, even if it's to XY, so as long as it's spitting out MIDI data, you could use that very easily with the new MIDI remote. All right, so we have a question. I've asked you this before, and now it happened again. After a crash in Cubase 12, the presets for workspaces, the settings for preferences, and some other presets in configuration are gone. Even the settings I have for the CC121 and external effects is missing. It's so frustrating to have to spend hours putting it all back again. Is there a simple way to find and restore the settings? This never happened in Cubase 10. I know I've checked to keep the presets or something similar after a restart like you suggested the last time. So, often when you start Cubase, and you could start it in safe mode, and as you do that, like after you have a crash, after maybe a plugin crashes Cubase, you may notice it says, your Cubase is running in safe mode. And the intention is that sometimes you could have a plugin or some third-party component that every time you have a project, you open it, and then you're kind of stuck because you can't open the project because the plugin that caused the crash is crashing every time it starts. So you could bypass all of your third-party plugins and all of your Cubase preferences to do that. Now, what you want to do is to maybe disable, not delete, your Cubase preferences. But if you disable, you could at that point, start the program and have everything set up. So once you have all those things set and configured, the one thing I would definitely do, just as always a safety measure, is go to the profile manager and export your profile. If you save these as presets, some of these would show up like, for your CC121 configuration. Some may show up in RAM presets, but if you have your preferences, always, as we showed before, when you come over to your preferences here, so on Mac OS, We would come over here to go to your library. And you could just copy all of your preferences. Now, if you have those set up in Cubase 10, you could probably just copy the preference files from Cubase 10 into your Cubase 12, and all of those settings would be carried over for your CC 121 configuration. So, try dragging. You'll see a Cubase 12. You'll have a Cubase 10 folders, preferences, whether you're on Mac or Windows, and a Cubase 12, and then you could just copy those particular files over, but save it as a profile, and if it happens again, you just simply import that profile. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions, and if you've learned something, make sure that you hit the like button. All right, so let's just jump back to our live feed. Hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to edit one MIDI pattern and affect all similar MIDI patterns at a go? All right, so if it was copied using a, there is a thing called, let me just jump to a different project to show you this. All right, so I'll just use this project. So let's come over here to pattern. All right, so let's say I come here. So if I wanted to make pattern copies, so I'm going to hit Control K, and we have this thing called shared patterns. So I'm going to enable Control or Command plus the letter K. Excuse me. And I'm going to have this do 15 copies. Okay, so now every time that I make a change in one of the patterns here, so let's say I want to take all of my hi-hat notes here, and I'm going to delete it from this one pattern that all of them are shared copies of. Well, notice that when I delete these notes, that these will automatically be carried over directly in the other parts. So I can edit one part and all the other parts. Now, if it's already been copied, you can't really, it's not going to look at it and say these are all similar, but it can, if you do the copy as a shared copy, and I think that there's even like maybe a keyboard shortcut for it as well. Let me just... So let's say if we hold down so if I just make a copy there, so but you can so try using it as shared copies, and again that's Control or Command plus K, and then when you make a change in kind of the original, all the changes that you make in that one will be applied to the other copies. All right, so we just see for Madge Deepers, is there a repository of macros that we could dip into? So if you want to email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, I'd be happy to share all of my macros. Sometimes the macros are tied to key commands. So if you have customized key commands, and then I send you macros, then at that point you may override your particular custom created key commands with mine that I use in addition to the macros, since the macros are part of the key commands file. So that's why often there's not kind of like a repository, and it's better to kind of take a look at a picture and be able to to recreate the macro pretty easily. But if you want to email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de or anyone else, I'd be happy to share my macros or logical editor, project logical editor shortcuts. All right, so we have a question. Why we need direct offline processing if we can render in place? Does direct offline process works with MIDI and with audio? So direct offline processing is just going to be, using, it's going to be for audio. So, and with direct offline processing, it's going to be, for that particular file. But a lot of times when you're rendering in place, you don't render with like different sample functions like, reverse, normalize. Render in place is going to be more effects, but there's also a number of different offline processes, such as, doing our fade in, fade out, gain, inverting phase, pitch, shifting, removing DC offset, resamples, reversing, silence, stereo flip, time stretch. Those things aren't generally plugins, and that's why, some of the other things that we can combine those with particular plugins and plugin chains. So that is why direct offline processing is there in addition to the render in place. And render in place could work for both audio and MIDI, whereas the direct offline processing is going to be just for the particular for that particular audio element, but, includes effects and typical sample editing functions. All right, so we have a question. Can you assign the macros to a MIDI remote device? I know it can be done on the generic remote, so yeah, it certainly can. So anytime you go to a remote device, let's say if we come here and we double click, you go to the key commands, and we just showed this a couple seconds ago, but I'm sure I'm just catching up, and all of your macros can be assigned to that particular, you could assign that macro directly to the actual function right there. So yeah, so just go under macros, under key commands, and you could assign any macro to any particular function right there. All right, we see Madge has to check out. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see the wonderful Fred Corey on the live stream. So his question is, hi, Greg. When in the edit window and have global tracks marker view on, when trying to copy and paste in the edit window, I must click the lower part of the window. If not, it copies in the project window. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick look, and we'll open up one of Fred's projects. Everyone should Google Fred Corey, wonderful composer, person, drummer, rock star, all that good stuff, and provides many good projects for me to use. All right. All right, so let's say I have markers here. And my marker is in the upper zone, so I'm just going to reread Fred's question. Okay. So we have global track. So let's say we have marker, and I'll just go ahead and we'll add a chord track. Or we'll do signature track. Let's do a tempo track. Okay. Okay, so it says, when in the edit window, I have global tracks, marker track view on. When trying to copy and paste in the edit window, I must click in the lower part of the window. If not, it copies in the project window. So I'm not sure if you're trying to copy data from here. So let's say if I copy and paste, if I do that there, or if I copy these parts and paste, it kind of stays there. So make sure I'm reading it right for Fred. So with this, as I copy within kind of, if we have our two zones here, and we can set up kind of our divided track list. We could turn it off there or turn it on by clicking on this little slash. So, but let me know, Fred, if you want to copy parts from here. So say if I copy this and I come over here and paste, that we could paste it in between the zones. So it's kind of whatever zone is active. But let me know what particular data you're trying to copy over, Fred. And glad you can make the live stream. Hope you and Amy are well. All right, so we see question. Why the default Cubase output volume in a control room is at -18 if I use Control plus click? So say if I come over here, it could be that perhaps, so if it's the control room volume here and we use Control plus click, that we could set it. But if we come to, it could be that maybe it was set as your reference level. So if you just change your reference level here to 0 and then hold down Alt or Option plus click to set. So now when I go to my level there, I could set it to the level. But let's say if I just come here to control, that will take me to my default reference level. So, but just hold down Alt or Option plus click if you want to change it, and then you could change it just like that, just by holding down Control clicking, and then when you hold down Alt plus click, you could set the new control room volume just like that. And it could be set to, why the default value might be -18 is, because of if you're doing, dB versus dB full scale. So. All right, so we see a question. How can I change a MP3 files to MIDI file on Cubase 12? Okay, so if it is a monophonic source, anytime that you would drop, it's the pitch to MIDI is going to be designed for monophonic sources. So if I want it to like go to a bass line here, we could double click. Let's go to Very Audio. We could have it do its analysis, and at this point, come over to our functions, and we could extract MIDI. It's not going to be, there's no real program that can just take like all the instruments and notate it. We could do some clever things to extract chords, but generally MP3s are compressed audio and MIDI is kind of two different things. So it's not like, you just, let's just turn it into this. There's, significant amount of, artificial intelligence and analysis that has to go on. But if we have a particular file and we want to figure out the chords from a particular audio file, we could come over. So, and if I have a chord track, I could just take like the audio from a particular. And all I'd have to do is drag that to a chord track, and we could figure out what the chords are, but it's not going to take the guitar and automatically, extract the performance of an MP3 mix. But if it's for like a vocal, saxophone solo, bass part, something monophonic where it's playing one note at once, then you're able to do that. With using Very Audio or Determine the Chords by dragging, and this is in Cubase 12, dragging the audio event to the particular chord track, just like that. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more coming up. We'll see if there's more questions come in. There's usually about a 30-second gap. All right, so we have Fozzie69 watching from London, England. Thanks for being part of the live stream today. We'll wait a couple more minutes, see if more questions come in. And if you did learn something new, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. And we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I think next Tuesday is the actual last live stream of the month. So what we usually do then is actually take we'll go for about 2 hours, and then the last 2 hours or 3 hours we'll have like a Zoom social meetup. So, and we'll be providing the link in the live stream, or if you want to email me, I'd be happy to provide the link, but that'll be a week from today. So usually it's an abbreviated live stream followed by kind of a Zoom social. It's always really fascinating conversations and people. We've had Fred Corey in, we've had Jean-Marie Horvat, who does a lot of really significant pop productions. We also had Clay Ostwald, who does a lot of stuff for Gloria Stefan. So lots of interesting people. All right. All right, so we see a question. Hello, I seem to have trouble routing audio in Cubase. I try to cascade out contact drum libraries to record in audio tracks, and I just can never get it to work. Always have to use Ableton, then import. So it should be easy enough to do. I'll show you just a trick. Here, let me jump to different project. Okay, so let's say I have like drums that are going out, and we'll take for granted that you know how to get like the audio outs from the instrument routed out accordingly. So let's say I have my drum pattern here, okay, and I want to split out the drums to their individual. Okay, so let's say, and I have these going to different outputs. So I don't have a license of contact here in this machine. So I'm going to say, okay, we're going to take this, my kick drum to output 2, my snare to output 3. Let's say hi-hats. We'll say to output 4, and we'll have output 5 for overheads, and let's say output 6 for our drum. So now as we play, and I'll solo this, we'll see that we'll have multiple channels all split out. So if I wanted to turn those into my individual files, I can see the outputs here if I just click on the instrument track, and we can see all the outputs. So to render these to audio files, all we would need to do is go to, now that they're being routed to different outputs, go to render in place. We'll go to the render settings. I'm going to choose channel settings, not dry, but just channel settings. And I will just, at this point, say render. And each of the files will be rendered independently. So I could have just my kick, my snare, hi-hat, overheads, and it even carries the name over from the output, and room mic. So just, set the outputs, and then at that point, and I'm running this as an instrument track originally, because then Cubase knows where the outputs are, and then render in place, and all the files will be just completely rendered. The outputs will be rendered individually. All right, so we have a question. How do you set up TalkBack in Control Room? I'm using the UR44C interface. So what you want to do is to have one of the inputs of your UR44C, let's say microphone input 4. We will go to our studio menu, to audio connections. We'll go to our control room, and at this point, we'll say TalkBack. So we're going to right-click and add a TalkBack. So your TalkBack will just say this is going into input wherever your microphone that you're using for the TalkBack is going into. You'll probably need to set up cue mixes so that people can hear the TalkBack. So if you have a singer, we can say, okay, the singer is going out of, headphones 1 and 2. So, or out of headphone output 2 on the UR44C, and we could set that to outputs 3 and 4. Then when we need to communicate with the person we're recording, let's say the vocalist, we could just activate talkback right here and make sure that in the control room for the Q mix that they have the talkback and turned on and enabled. So if you have a whole band, you could just say, talk to everyone except the bass player. Say, hey drummer, give the bass player a big nod. He keeps missing this out, and say, oh yeah, that was a really good, bass player. Let's try one more time. Maybe look at the drummer. So you could communicate to different people, all just by enabling. So you need to have the Q mix set up so that we could just at this point have the talkback enabled to the Q mix, and then just turn the talkback on right here. And you could use like a foot switch on your actual, to turn talkback on and off, or any MIDI message that you want as well. Okay, so we see a question from Jeff Sabelski. Greg, when using Wavelab Pro 10, is there a way to ensure that no fidelity is being lost when using the noise reduction, like quick click and pop removal settings? So as you're doing, any noise reduction, often what it's looking for is, within Wavelab, you could have it take like a noise print. So if you have like a little bit of audio before anything is recorded, which is often the case, it could learn that particular noise and take that out. But, you have to kind of be often a bit judicious with the use of any noise reduction, any noise reduction source, as it can affect the original source. So, you just have to kind of play around with it and make the adjustments by ear. And maybe, to take different sections, you may have for one particular area of restoration, you may just process just that region so that it's not one setting that's doing everything, but you can say, okay, these are the settings for this part. And I may use different settings and select a range and do the processing on a different part of the same audio file. All right, we see Michael Teams has to run for his session. Have a good session, Michael, and we'll see you on Friday. So we see this might be with the routing questions. It's like, oh, wow, I feel dumb. It was that easy. I was like creating buses and outputs and groups in Cubase and a studio tab, etc. You could do that, and it's really helpful if you get paid by the hour and you're trying to pad some time. But if you want to get it done, I think that's probably the fastest way to do it. And it says, thank you for that, and thank you so much. I was doing that, but I didn't know just how to render in place and get the audio silly me. So, well, you're not silly if you learn new tricks by coming to a Club Cubase live stream. So. And also mentioned I was pulling my hair out of my head, being able to get inserts on individual outputs before the render process. So it's always nice when it's simpler than you thought. All right, so just the question is, anyone in the Discord figure out how to get QC controls to work with the Arturia Keylab Mark II? I see the scripts, but the key step, but the Mark II Keylab seems to be difficult. So one of the things that it might be, I'm not sure if that's one that has that's automatically detected, kind of like my Korg Nano control. So let's say if I jump over here to my Nano control, that there's different mapping pages. So one could be set for the selected track, one could be for the mixer, and one could be where the potentiometers here are just running quick controls. So maybe if it's showing up there, if not, if you really want to just set it up for quick controls, I'll just add kind of a new one here. I'll just come over. So let's say I have a choy sauce controller. So if you wanted to make just quick controls, we'll just add a vendor. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'll just make kind of sliders for quick controls. And I'm just going to move to first, second, third, the different MIDI faders. And this could be for any MIDI controller. All right, so we've added those. And now all we have to do is double click. And we could say, let's go, I'm going to move this fader. And let's go to our focused quick controls. Quick control 1, double click, move this, double click. So now when I go to a particular quick controls for tracks, we'll close this, and now they're all being controlled via the choy sauce. So you could just take anything that transmits MIDI data and just have it spit out for your focus quick controls that fast. All right, so you see Jeff Sabelski saying next Tuesday for a video session. So yeah, we'll have our Zoom meetup next Tuesday. I'm pretty sure it's the last day. The 31st, I think, is Wednesday. So yeah, it'll be next Tuesday. All right, so we see question, how do I set a Mac to always start up Cubase 12 in Rosetta mode? I've ticked the box to only open in Rosetta mode, but I still have to start it up twice to get it to work. So on my M1 Mac, once I just... Let's come over here to... Sorry, I'll just close that. Let's go to my applications... Sorry. Do that again. Sorry. Operator error. So, and then I right clicked and just get info. And then I just clicked open using Rosetta and it's stuck for me. So every time that I open up in Rosetta mode, it just automatically, it doesn't toggle back and forth. So I see, hi Greg, in Cubase 3, is there a way to do time signatures like 6/8, 9/8, 2/4, and others? Thanks in advance. So I don't have my iPad handy right now, and I don't really have a way of showing it, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could take a look at it. Okay, so we have a question from Nick. When using MIDI sends to send to separate second instrument, is it possible to render that second instrument, or do you actually have to copy the MIDI data there beforehand? All right, so let's give it a shot. Do new project. All right, so let's say I have Rhodes here, and let me just add another track instrument. All right, so let's say so all right, so I have both these. All right, so what I want to do is go to my MIDI send here, and I'm going to just activate an arpeggiator and send it to Retrolog. Just find them. Be different. Okay, so I'm going to play this chord. So what we're doing is we're taking the Hallian Sonic SE track and then... All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and... All right. So let me just record just one event instead of two. Okay, and let's see what happens. Just try quick render in place. Yeah, so it looks like we may have to All right, so I'll just go play this one more time. Okay. Let's see if we select both of these. Still going to be the one. So in this case, what you may have to do is add a group channel to both of them, add an audio track from the group, and now as we record, So you may have to let me just try capturing that. So if we do that from the beginning, so just kind of routing it to a group and then taking the group, routing it to an input. Not sure why it's popping out of record, but okay, I have this turned off. All right. All right, so now we listen to this. It should be both of them. Let me just see if this is. So now that they're both being routed to the group, this should work. I'll make sure that the retro log is also being sent. Yeah, so you could do it. You may have to just kind of route it through a group and then from the group to an audio input, Nick. Sorry about that. All right, so we just see Justin saying, I'll have to set up custom setup for the quick controls like this. Yeah, it'll take you just a couple minutes. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, does a faster GPU like the passive NVIDIA GT 1030, this card does 4K display on 2 screens, make a performance difference on audio as well? By the way, is there any minimum GPU recommended? So I'm using kind of an old in my studio computer. I'm using kind of an older, I think it's ATI or an AMD now card that in. So I'm not doing 4K on 2 screens, but I'm doing kind of a 1080p on 2 screens. So I may not be the best person to ask, but maybe other people could share some insights. Sometimes, depending on the mode you're in, so some of the NVIDIA, you might have to take it out of gaming mode, and I think that there might be like a DAW mode profile, which seems to help. But maybe, I know Jazz Dude does a lot of work testing these things. I don't, get a number of video cards to test with. All right. So we see question from Soren. Do you think the chord track with Chord Assistant will come to Cubase in the future? The fact that we have chord pads were great, but would love getting the chord track. I'll pass it along as a feature request to the team. So. All right. Thanks, Jazz Dude, for moderation. All right, we see Jazz Dude is just suggesting a mid-range GPU, like around $150-ish. You see Nick saying, cheers, Greg, or should I say king of the workaround? So yeah, I'll take that label with pride. So All right, and wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you could make it. Okay, so you see a question. When importing vocal sample, always have to warp by hand sync. How to import in sync and maybe in key. I tried already to click in sync. Click the sync button on the browser. Thank you. Okay, so generally, if it's going to be probably like a vocal sample, you may have, so sometimes you may have, we have some vocal samples here in Bloom. So let's say, all right, so these we'll see kind of our tempo sync. So sometimes, let me just reread it. So it says, always have to warp by hand sync. So a lot of times, vocal samples may not be like as rhythmic as a drum beat. So you might have to, come in and, as you mentioned, just kind of choose to, manually warp your different components here. So let's say if we wanted to make this so, but again, not, every vocal file isn't necessarily going to, have every beat so clearly defined. So now if we wanted to kind of warp this, you could do it. But a lot of vocal samples, just by the nature of the material, you would probably have to warp manually. So you say how to import in sync, so again, depending on the phrases. So here we could, as we import it, our file. So let's say we do this and I feel the. So as soon as I drop it in, we could place it into musical mode. And then, as we just drop it in. So we'll go back to the beginning of the sample here. I feel the weight. But let's say now I want to, since it's in musical mode, I can just come right over here and let's go to 100 beats a minute. And now when I play it, it's going to be in sync. I feel the weight. And, a lot of times samples, there is metadata that can do scale correction, but the vast majority of times samples don't have that. So like even this, it's not necessarily like a chord, but if you wanted to, so we could see like, the phrase, but it doesn't indicate what notes or what pitches. And that's not, generally most samples aren't embedded with that. So you may have to manually transpose, but as soon as you drop it in rhythmically, it should fit just as soon as if it has tempo metadata, then you put it into musical mode. And again, you can put it into musical mode right here. So if I take it out of musical mode and listen to it, feel the weight. There's no real correlation between it. It's going to play back the same. If I now jump to 144 beats a minute, it'll play back the same speed, but the metronome is faster. I feel the weight. And as soon as the sample is in musical mode, at that point, I feel the weight. It's going to automatically follow. So. All right, so we have Dalpski checking in from Netherlands. Thanks for joining. Okay, and his question is, in Media Bay, my samples don't start from the beginning, but start halfway through. Mostly, is this normal? So. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come over here. Okay, so now when I kind of just play, it's going to automatically kind of start at the beginning. So let's see if autoplay is turned on, and maybe if we start here. I feel the So it seems they all seem to kind of play back at the beginning. So I'm not sure if maybe you have like a loop. So if you wanted to just kind of audition kind of just the loop part, you could do that quite easily. So maybe it's something like that you've created a loop. All right. Let's see if there's more questions that come. If not, we could wrap up a little early. All right, so just see, can you show again? So, check to see, like, if you have the pencil tool here. So I'm not sure if you're, make sure that you're triggering it, like, from the event as opposed to triggering from the sample window here. But if I just kind of click, but as soon as I go to a new one, and it could also be that there's an aligned beats. So like if you're playing with a project, and let's say I start like at beat 4, that you could choose to have the beats aligned. So, all right, so it says, can you show again the loop thing? So if you're here, you'll see that when you move to the top, you'll see it turn into a pencil, and then you could just drag it across. And then if you wanted to just drag that loop, just that portion of the loop over as well, you could do that. Okay. All right, so just see from iBlaze LA, it says media has been running for a day and still hasn't finished. Metadata or media bay. So it seems like that's a long time, but it could depend on how fast, if it's like a really slow disk, or it seems like that's kind of slow, or if you have like a billion samples on it. So and Jazz Dude makes a good point that you can set up more files just going into the preferences, and you'll see media bay. It may default to 10,000 files, but you could set it up to 100,000. All right, so you see, how do I bring the sample in key? So, most samples, some of the samples can have metadata for that, and then you could set the key of the song, the vast majority of samples do not have this metadata. So, but if we set a global key, let's say our root key here, and I'll just move this up a little bit so you can see it. Okay, so if we come here, we can say, okay, we could have your root key of D. And now as we would go to a library, so like probably even the Bloom library.
In light we light.
So let's say I look at this inside of Media Bay, like the full Media Bay here. So some of these looks like it has some of the keys. So
In light we
all right, so let me just come here. Let's say if I
in light we light.
okay, so we're gonna put this in musical mode. And let's say we change our root key here. So I want to change this to G. So yeah, not everything, most vocal samples won't follow kind of root keys. So. All right, so we see Greg, question. Is there a way to view a MIDI track superimposed over an audio track or just in the main window with an edit in place, looking to sync up a rolling bass line with audio drums? So, you know, the one way that you might be able to do this is, let's say if we come here and we go to, I'll show you something. It may not be as ideal for drums, but let's say I'm in my Very Audio editor. One of the things that you could do here is use a reference. So say I want to use a piano. So this is more for being able to kind of see you know, so we could see kind of our stuff, but otherwise you might have to you know, just deal with kind of the in-place editor and use that as a reference point. So let's say if I wanted to come here and we'll open up the in-place editor. So, but you can, in the Very Audio, if you could have a MIDI reference part. All right. Oh, wonderful to see Gareth has made it back. We missed you. I don't know if you're on holiday back in the UK or not, but wonderful to see you. All right, so let's take a look, see if there's more questions that come in. Okay. Sorry about that. And if you've learned something, make sure that you hit the like button or subscribe to the channel. All right, we'll see if there's more questions coming in. So you see Gareth was on holidays and other commitments. And his brother's wedding. We hope your brother had a nice wedding. You had a good time seeing family. Yeah, our summer's been pretty uneventful, and my son started school yesterday, so. All right, we'll see if more questions come in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. All right. Okay, so we see I'm puzzled. Let's see, a Wavelab question. So let's go there. Okay, so it says, I am puzzled by the audio editor tab corrections in the function detect all errors, especially detect clipping. When is that used? You showed global analysis. All right, so let's go. All right, so all right. Okay, so what I think that this error is kind of for is like, let's say if you have, all right, so let's say we'll look for errors here. Okay, so let's say if we're looking at this and we think that there's an error, so it could be something just for, I'll just draw one in here. So usually this correction is for like if you have the ability to take like even different, I think different spectrum editing. So if you needed to replace parts that were maybe in one part of the song and be able to replace individual spectrums, that's going to work in conjunction with this error. So let's say, let me just draw in a quick error here. So I could do some more research on this, but I think what this will allow you to do is as we go to kind of like, you know, like a lot of times when we're doing, like if we have one little thing, like, you know, one sample that we could redraw this in, that it could do short synthesis or kind of in painting. And that's often kind of taking maybe different frequencies from a different part of the song and in painting them in. So, but I'll do some more research on that. See, Gareth's kids having their 2 weeks. I don't mind having inexpensive daycare for a little while in the summer. So, all right. So a question. Hi, it's Doe from Cameroon. I have a Behringer X Touch used as Mackie control. There are some keys that are not functioning. Is it possible to assign directly Cubase function to those keys? So a lot of times when working with Cubase, so if it is like functions in, on the particular controller, so there is like, I think 8 user assignable functions. So let's go to your studio menu, to your studio setup. And let's say if we add a Mackie control, that now we could, we have user A, B, F1, shift plus F1, that we could assign these particular functions to, two different functions right here. So I say, okay, I want this to open up the mixer, or export audio. So we could just say, okay, I want to go to my mixer, and we could assign, show hide EQ curves, whatever. So we could assign different functions from the user assignable functions on the Mackie control. So let me know if it's like the user AB and the F1, shift F1 modifier keys for that. All right. So we see from Gareth just asking, send me an email if there's any songs or anything outstanding you'd like I didn't send you. So I don't think I got the song you sent to Sable to sing on. So if that's ready, I'd be happy to play bass on that or anything else. So we see from Jason Sykes, when I import an audio file, the channel is at full volume. Is there any way to change this? Thanks. All right, so I'll just do a brand new project. Okay, so let's say if I go to import an audio file, just find a quick file here. All right, so let's say if I just drop this in, we go to our mix. So in our mixer here should default to 0 dB as we do this in. If you're dragging from the media bay, however, it might be slightly different. So let's say if I'm in my media bay and I have my preview volume set to the maximum here, and then I drag and drop that in, then this volume, the preview volume, is carried over when importing. So if I lower the preview volume, we'll notice that the volume here. So maybe if you're dragging from Media Bay, see if your preview volume is all the way up, and that could cause it, or if the preview volume is all the way down, we could just do that and we'll see kind of those different changes set. But usually just importing the file should, if you import it into an existing audio track or import the audio file, we'll do it at 0 dB by default. See, Gareth is also with me on the economical daycare, so. And you get to learn stuff too. All right, so we see Soren's looking forward to my research. Yeah, if you want to send me just a brain cramp email reminder, Soren, that would be much appreciated on the Wavelab. All right, so we see Gareth was a hot mess in Malaga. I've been to Malaga a couple times, so. right. All right, so we see the Dalpsky just saying, it's me again. I tried Media Bay with the line beats to project off, only then the samples start from the beginning. Strange. Okay, well, at least kind of got it figured out. All right, so Gareth has a question. How to record Vox during a fireworks display, apparently with a big bang. So, all right, so we see Jason Sykes saying, yes, thank you. So with probably the volume from dragging it from the media bay with that. So, all right. And once again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. If not, I think we're at the end of questions so far. You see Jason Sykes was dragging in from the media bay, so. All right, we'll give it another like 10 or 15 seconds. If not, we'll wrap up early. Earlier night of indexing. And again, we'll be doing this on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, same time we started today. And we usually do this every Tuesday and Friday. All right, so with that, I guess we will go ahead and... All right, Gareth just saying, remember, everyone at Cubase is the beast, and to smash the like button. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. It's wonderful to see you back, Gareth, and also to have Jeff Zabelski back, and we look forward to seeing everyone again on Friday. Please take care, and everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back in a couple days. Thank you.